the foundation of creativity is safety. And if we don't
Yes.
have safety, we can't take a creative risk, show up in a creative space, experience our own magic of creativity that lives within us 24/7, whether we pay attention to it or not.
Welcome to How to Trust Yourself, the podcast for anyone who's done with the endless second guessing and ready to tune in to your inner guidance. I'm Anna Holtzman, and I get that feeling of trudging through life like you're wading through mud, trying to figure out which way to go. In my 20s, I spent more time asking what should I do with my life than writing about crushes or bad dates in my journal. I've tried on a lot of answers: architecture, publishing, editing reality TV for a decade, and finally landing on therapy and coaching, helping people like you connect with your purpose. But here's the thing I've learned through all those twists and turns. Trusting yourself is the key to moving forward, even when the path feels messy. So if you're ready to stop doubting yourself and start listening to your gut, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back, dear listener. If you've ever thought, I'm just not a creative person, then this episode is for you. And if you know deep down that you are absolutely a creative person, this episode is also for you. Today, I'm talking with Mari Reisberg, a therapist, performer, certified creativity and innovation coach, and host of the Sustaining Creativity podcast. Mari holds a BFA in acting and a master's in somatic counseling psychology and dance movement therapy. And she spends her days helping both performers and self-identified non-creative humans spark, grow, and sustain creativity in their lives. We get into what creativity actually is, why it's so much more than painting or performing, and how it lives in all of us, including the parts that feel blocked, frozen, or burned out. Mari brings together body-based therapy, play, and nervous system-aware tools, and she has this really grounded way of making creativity feel accessible instead of precious or intimidating. If you're feeling stuck, uninspired, or like your creative self is somewhere back there, this conversation will give you both language and practical tools to start reconnecting. Hi, Mari. It's so lovely to get to see you again, and I'm so glad to get to have another conversation with you. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Anna. I am super excited to chat with you today. And I know this is going to be a fantastic conversation from our previous chats. So I can't wait to dive in.
Agreed. I can't wait to see where it's going to go. And to start us off, for folks who haven't had the pleasure yet of having a conversation with you, or perhaps even hearing your podcast or getting to know your work, could you share with the listeners of this podcast what you do and who you help?
Absolutely. So I have many titles, but the ones that I use, I am a certified innovation and creativity coach. I'm also a licensed professional counselor in the state of Colorado. I am a actor, singer, dancer, performer, have been performing most of my life, started professionally performing when I was 3. I have a degree in acting and a degree in psychology, and I've combined those two pieces to come up with my own personal version of creative support, which I call sustaining creativity. And I work with individuals who feel like they fall into the performing arts creativity category. And I work with people who feel like they fall into the I'm not creative category and everything in between. So that's the population of individuals that I work with. I work with a lot of people who consider themselves to be former creatives and people who are just kind of finding their footing in this experience of creativity and learning how it shows up in their own life and finding their creative voice and learning what creativity feels like in their body and sounds like coming out of them. So those are the pieces of individuals that I support. And then in my private therapy practice, I work with people who are in transitions. So anything from graduating college to empty nest to having babies, getting divorced, all of these pieces. So the major transitions we have in our life, that is what I work with.
Yeah. And you have a wonderful podcast that's also called Sustaining Creativity.
Yes, I do. Thank you for reminding the listeners that I do. Yes. It's a podcast, an interview style podcast where I interview and chat with people from around the world about creativity and what it means to them. You can find it on all streaming platforms. And we are 5.5 years old. So there's a
Wow, that's
lot of
amazing.
episodes. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
I
congrats.
release new episodes every Tuesday, and this week, I think we're around, 312
How
episodes.
cool is
So
that?
lots and lots of content. If you're on long drives, give it a listen.
That is so cool. Congratulations for being on the airwaves for that long. And I
Thank you.
know that a lot of my listeners here are going to appreciate what you have to share because there are many in this group of listeners who definitely identify as creative and who also identify as highly sensitive and who have, feel inside this great desire to share their voice and their presence and their expression with the world. And also, simultaneous with that, a great fear of sharing their voice, their presence, their expression with the world. And I know that they and I am going to get to learn a lot from the experience and wisdom that you are sharing with us today. And to start out with, in as much or little detail as you'd like to share, what has been the path that led you to this combination of work that you do?
So it started, I mean, when I really think back, it started when I was around 3 years old. I was a very rowdy child, and my mother was pregnant with my younger brother, and she wanted me out of the house. So she sent me to trapeze school, which was
Whoa.
down the street from where I lived in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
And I started trapeze and physical theater and circus skills. So that
Oof.
was kind of the beginning of performing for me. And I like to tell people I grew up in the circus, and the performing bug bit me back then and just kept on going. So I was a performer in their children and adult companies for 17 years before I went to college, and had
Wow.
many iterations, excuse me, of performance, whether it was in a street fair or a parade or in school on stage or high school and performing and show choir and all of those pieces. And I went to a university in Connecticut called the University of Hartford and the Hart School of Music, which is their performing arts conservatory. But between high school and college, I took a year off and I toured with a theater company and had the privilege of performing off Broadway in New York and living there at 18, which was a wild experience, and touring around the Pacific Northwest and California and New York with this trapeze troupe that I was in, and then went to college for acting and moved to New York following that. And that was when the reality of performing and what it means to be a full-time career actor or performer kind of hit me.
Yeah.
And there were often times I learned at auditions, people didn't really know what to do with me. I was taller than everyone. I
Mm.
had the body shape of someone's mom, but on camera, I looked, 12. with my face and my smile. And they just didn't quite know how to use me or put me in things. And that was really challenging. And
Yeah.
so that was where a lot of my own challenges of identity and safety and trust kind of developed, and rejection. When
Yeah.
you hear no every day from multiple people, and it's not necessarily based on your talent, but based on how you look or how you sound, that
Yes.
is really challenging to navigate. And so I ended up singing with an Irish band as my version of performance. And that was an amazing experience
Mm.
and so much fun. And that really allowed me to share my creative voice and creative expression. But I always
Mm.
felt like I wanted something more, something different. And my dad at the time was starting to think about himself going back to school. And he and I were having a conversation on the phone. And he encouraged me to look into some of the creative arts therapies. And I was the person, whether it was at school with friends or strangers on the street, someone was telling me their problems or their challenges or their life
Yeah.
stories. And I remember one moment, it was probably 2:30 in the morning. I was sitting at a diner in New York City with girlfriends, having gone out earlier to the dance club, and we were eating and having coffee and chatting. And this woman walked up to our table unannounced and
Mm.
said, I'm a recovering alcoholic on day 165. I really need to sit down and have a cup of coffee and talk to someone. And I immediately said, absolutely, sit down, please
Yeah.
join us. And so she
Yeah.
sat down, and for the next hour, she drank coffee and chatted with us. And then, she had a couple cups of coffee and talked through her kind of her life with us while my
Mm.
girlfriends and I were just eating and chatting. And she finished her coffee and stood up and she said, thank you so much. You are my angels this evening. And then turned around and went back to her apartment and,
Mm.
never saw her or heard from her again. But it was that moment of experiencing, and I have tingles running down my spine sharing
Oh,
this story
I got
again.
tears just spurted out of my eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. Just knowing that, someone has that courage to ask for help and ask for
Yeah.
support, and someone else shows up and says, yes, absolutely, I'm here. And so that moment really shifted things for
Mm.
me in figuring out I really love supporting people and love working with individuals, but not necessarily in the most linear logical path. And so that's where the creative arts therapies really
Mm.
exploded in my world, and specifically dance movement therapy, because movement and dance has always been a huge part of my own life and how I've really tapped into my own physical body and experience and expression and learning who I am through movement. And
Yeah.
so that was how I stepped into the path of psychology and got my master's in somatic psychology, which is body based psychology, from Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado. So I moved from New York City to Boulder, Colorado, a very big
Mhm.
culture shock and
Oh, yeah.
very different experience. And 3 years later, had my master's and started working in hospitals and various outpatient settings, and that has been kind of more of that professional trajectory. And then I realized, wow, I was really missing my own creativity and my own creative expression. And so every once in a while, I get back on stage and get to perform, which is
Mm.
so much fun. And early on, I want to say 2013 was when I started weaving together the acting and creativity pieces and my psychology background. Because in acting school, I felt like I learned how to be an incredible performer, but I didn't learn how to navigate all the ups and downs that come with being a creative person and being a really tender, sensitive, creative person.
Yes.
And that was where the psychology and therapeutic skill really came in and helped me kind of craft this version of sustaining creativity, which I started sharing
Mm.
to university students around the country at different universities. This is all pre COVID. And then we hit the pandemic and
Yes.
we weren't traveling. I wasn't doing this virtually yet. And so I decided I really wanted to continue the conversation of creativity. And that's where my Sustaining Creativity podcast was born. And that became such a huge creative experience for me to interview and talk to other people, people who felt creative, people who didn't feel creative. That was such an incredible journey and continues to be an incredible journey. I learn something new every time I talk to someone. And so that's my podcast, and then starting a private practice and working with coaching clients around specifically creativity and rediscovering a creative spark, but also navigating those imposter syndrome moments
Yes.
or the fear or the anxiety or the sadness of being told you're not creative, and helping and supporting individuals to rediscover who they are through a creative lens and finding the safety to do that. Because I believe the foundation of creativity is safety. And if we don't
Yes.
have safety, we can't take a creative risk, show up in a creative space, experience our own magic of creativity that lives within us 24/7, whether we pay attention to it or not. So
Yes.
that's where I was long winded, but that's what got me
And
here.
beautiful, and
Thank you.
beautiful, and I love how you said the foundation of creativity is safety. I so vibe with that. That is that like, that meshes so well with, what I feel and believe in my approach, and so many of us, the foundation of creativity is safety, and so many of us, maybe all of us in some way, have had these formative experiences where we learned consciously or unconsciously to
Mhm.
associate our creativity with the opposite of safety. I'm thinking of the experience you described when you were auditioning as a performer
Yeah.
and you experienced all this rejection and being told you don't fit into a type that is castable. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, I just, can empathetically feel like the contraction in my own body, the feeling
Yeah.
of like, I'm expressing my creativity here, and I'm learning that it's the opposite of safe. It's actually very dangerous. I'm experiencing this
Mhm.
this negative experience of rejection. How do we work with these, like, I call them visibility wounds?
Yeah.
How do we work with and through these so that we can actually sustain creativity? Because I think what happens for many of us is that
Mhm.
we shut it down when we have those
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to share this amazing study that NASA in, I want to say the late 70s, um, oh, I can't think of the word, they put out into the world, or they instituted. And the gentleman who did the study, his name is George Land, and he interviewed, I want to say, 1,000 3 to 5 year olds and did kind of a creativity scale for them and assessment. And the 3 to 5 year olds, they rated 92% creative expression. And then he took those same kids 5 years later and did it again.
Ugh.
And then again 5 years later until they were 15.
Yeah.
And then following that, he did a much larger study. I want to say like 180,000 adults, 18 and up. And the downward spiral of
Oh, yeah.
the creative expression from the time someone is 5 to an adult is
Yes.
tremendous.
I
So,
just, and obviously I and probably most listeners could predict where this was going
yes.
before you got to the end of it. And
Yeah.
just last night, coincidentally, we had our neighbor came over. Happens to be that both she and her husband are actors, they're
Oh,
performers. And
I
she
love it.
came over with their 2.5-year-old daughter,
Mm.
who is just so unbelievably expressive and
Yeah.
creative and unself-conscious. And I mean, I just could have watched this kid all night. Like, she's the
Uh-huh.
most fascinating thing. You just don't know what's going to come out of her mouth or her expressions. And it's all just so creative and interesting. And her mom was saying, like, she's so outgoing and expressive. And she's like, it just pains me to know that at a certain age, she's going to learn that that's not always wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. And those, I mean, we're so tender at that age and so
Yeah.
wanting to show up in authenticity. We don't know those words, but we don't know anything else. And so I just to give listeners the jump from 5-year-old to adulthood, 92% creative expression at 5 years old, 2% creative expression in
Oh,
adulthood. So in the span of a very short amount of time,
yeah.
we knowing and unknowingly squash our creative voice, our creative experience, our creative expression. So that I think just knowing that it is something we have to consciously participate in and
Yeah.
consciously pay attention to and consciously navigate. And so it is something that is like a muscle you have to flex and you have to
Yeah.
work. So you have more of it as you get older. And a lot of
Yes.
times it's about remembering what it was like when you were a little kid. What were those things that you participated in? What was the type of play? I mean, there's many different types of play. Was it fantasy? Was it rough and tumble? Was it book play? Was it, game play? Whatever it was for you, reconnecting with those types of play can be an incredible place to reignite or rediscover your own creative voice and creative experience. But as you asked this question about safety and how do we find it? How do we cultivate it? And safety, I think, can be split into multiple categories. And sometimes we are responsible for safety of ourself, our
Yeah.
individual piece. And then there's a collective safety piece, which is kind of our environment that we're in. But there's also the safety of the space we choose to express our creativity or tap into our creativity. So in your home, what is your space of creating? Is it a corner of your bedroom? Is it your office? And what are those pieces that help you feel connected, safe for you to express that? I have, for people who are watching this and not listening, I have this rock that someone painted for me that says love on it. And I keep
Oh,
that and I hold it when I feel less sure of myself. And that
yeah.
helps me reconnect and remind me, oh, right, I trust myself. I feel connected. Or I know what I need to do to reconnect and feel that safety. And
Yeah.
safety and trust, while they go hand in hand, are very different, but we need both of them to fully express our creative self and our creative voice. But that foundation of safety, not only do we need safe space, we also need safe time. So if we're not setting time aside to create or to express ourselves in a creative fashion, then that gets in our way of being able to be creative. And then safe mind, what are we telling ourselves? Are we saying, oh, that was silly, that was ridiculous, or that was nuts, I can't believe I did that, and in a more negative fashion? So how are we talking? How is that inner monologue in, incorporating and in like preventing us from expressing? So those are kind of
You
the
you know what's interesting? What comes to something that comes to my mind is in order to make the effort to create a safe environment for ourselves, to block off time for ourselves, to establish that bubble of safety in which creativity can emerge and flower, we have to give importance to our own need for creativity. Because
yes.
I could just hear in my mind like the kind of collective consciousness of inner critic voice saying like,
Hmm.
"Ugh, do you really need like if you're going to be creative, you're going to be creative. You really need like a perfect little environment and to block off time. You're either going to create or you're not." But then at the same time, I can hear the collective kind of typical inner, taskmaster voice saying, "Well, I need to do my taxes today. So I need time alone. I need to close
Yep.
the door. I need a clean room that's not a mess." Like
Yeah.
we do sort of know that these things are important on some level for our, ourselves to be able to function and
Hmm.
in the realm that we want to be functioning. But there's something about creativity. I think that's, I don't know, what comes to me is it's so tied to our inner worth.
It is very much so. And I don't want to, let people know, like, if you can't create a quote unquote safe space separate from where you sleep or where you eat, it's not about that. It's about you feeling safe in the space, whatever the space is. It could be standing at your refrigerator, pulling food out to put together to make a meal. I also think it's important to recognize there are different types of creativity. There is what I call big C creativity,
Mm.
which is like
Oh, yeah.
performing. And, we do something that we then share with other people. And a small c creativity is something that we essentially are just doing for ourselves. So whether it's making your favorite tea or your cup of coffee in the morning and sitting and allowing yourself to daydream, that's a creative experience. That's a creative moment, but that isn't for anyone else. That's for you to start your day or to start your moment. And so I think oftentimes we can get stuck or caught in everything has to be quote unquote right to be creative. And you can be creative doing anything. You could be creative walking your dog. You could experience creativity getting dressed in the morning. You could experience creativity putting takeout food on a plate in a certain fashion or having little sauces. Like whatever it is for you, that gets to be your creative expression. It could be color coding a spreadsheet or your to-do list.
Yeah. I don't know, this is just kind of a metaphor that's coming to me, but I'm sort of, I love how you're breaking things down. I've never really thought in exactly this amount of detail about creativity. And I'm sort of thinking like with the small c creativity, if I'm folding clothes and I'm like humming and I'm kind of swaying while I'm moving, then I'm in a creative mode. If I'm folding clothes and I'm in my mind, I'm like, "Oh, I gotta get this done so I can get the next thing done." Like, and I'm not in a creative place with it.
Absolutely. It's the intention, but it's also that idea of anything can be creative and
Yeah.
anyone can be creative. It isn't There isn't a special gene that people are born with, the creative gene or not. Like I said, it's a muscle. Everyone can learn to flex it, but you have to use it to have it. Like
Yeah.
the more you use it, the more you have. That
Now,
quote by Maya Angelou. She's-
yes. So I know I'm hearing that you work with a wide variety of people um in this like sustaining creativity work. You do it with a variety of people, ranging from those who would consider them like selves professional creatives, like
Mhm.
performers, artists, etc., as well as folks who might come into the work with you saying, "Oh, I'm not creative." When it comes to folks who see themselves as primarily a creative, I can imagine that, doing this work might, for example, lead to more creative output, like
Mhm.
lead to like a new performance piece or something like that. When it comes to folks who don't identify themselves as a creative, what sorts of like things do you see this work rippling out into in their lives?
Oh my goodness. Anything from parenting to leaving a job to finding a new job to finding hobbies. I mean, creativity, while it is not a replacement for professional mental health help and support, it can impact our self esteem, which in turn impacts our depression, our anxiety. So it has a ripple effect when we are accumulating positive things in our life, when we're building mastery of certain tasks, whether it's showering every day or writing for 10 minutes. Both are allowed to be creative and allowed to have creativity fueling it. 78% of people get their best ideas while showering.
Yes.
So
Oh, I'm one of
take a
those. Yes.
shower. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think
Yeah.
it's important to remember, you know, that even though you may not consider yourself to be creative, when you tap into or when you look at life through a creative lens, whether it's because you're experiencing depression or sadness or grief or loss, and you get outside and go for a walk, and all of a sudden you start noticing every yellow thing and you weren't thinking about it, it's a way for your nervous system to reset and allow it to have a pause. Because
Yeah.
if we stay in the spiral of deep emotion for too long, I say too long, for an extended period of time, our nervous system will adapt to that and it will need more of it to signal us, oh, I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling grief or I'm feeling depressed. Well, when we add in the creative experience, we allow our nervous system to pause. We allow our nervous system to reset so that we then keep restarting from a baseline versus that higher um, intensity space.
A quick pause here because I want to invite you into something that I think could shift the way you feel about showing up. If you're a sensitive creative or entrepreneur, and the idea of being really seen and heard brings up fear, resistance, or that, oh no, not me feeling, you are in good company. My free visibility workshop, Let Yourself Be Seen, is all about making visibility feel safe to your nervous system and true to you. We'll explore how to work with fear as a doorway into more authentic self expression so you can share the work that matters most to you without pushing, pretending, or burning out. You can save your spot or catch the replay at annaholtzman.com/be seen. Okay, let's get back to the conversation. As I'm listening to you, what's coming to me, I think I've maybe thought this in some form before, but it's just coming in more clearly, is that creativity, we could see it as a nervous system state. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure I'm not the only one to I'm sure other people have already talked about this, but it's just sort of dawning on me that we talk these days in the realm of self-help and psychology, we talk a lot about nervous system states triggered by a sense of threat or danger. There, the fight,
Hmm.
flight, freeze, appease. We
Yeah.
talk a lot less about the nervous system states that are brought on by a sense of safety. I've heard
Hmm.
folks talk more so about like the rest and digest state, but
Yeah.
the connect and create is, I think, a part of that too. And there's probably someone who's spoken about this already in much more academic language than I am.
You're absolutely right. It is part of that safety, connection, bonding. It's that, but it also shows up in play and
Yeah.
excitement and joy. And so in psychology, we talk a lot about our ability to tolerate experiences, and we have a window of tolerance, and we leave our window upper end and lower end. And each of those ends, when it becomes challenge, like the challenge leaving versus the recovery leaving of that window of tolerance,
Yeah.
we experience that differently in our nervous system. But when we leave on the upper end in the comfort, it's the connection, bonding, love, joy, play, excitement, peace. And so we want to be able to do that. And for many people, they have an upper limit to experiencing and tolerating joy and excitement and play and wonder and, curiosity. And so I think the more we practice, because it is
Yeah.
a practice, the more accessible it is to us. And it's recognizing where your limits, where your upper end or edge is. And it's not about blowing past it all the time. It's about arriving at it and maybe taking one foot across it. It's
Yeah.
that, this idea that creativity comes alive at the edge of your comfort zone, not 20 miles past it, but at the edge of it. And
Yeah.
I think oftentimes we forget that to be creative, we still need to have comfort, but we need to also have something that is exciting a little bit outside of that comfort level or comfort zone.
When you're working with folks in the your sustaining creativity work, whether you're working with individuals or groups,
Hmm.
is there kind of a common trajectory, or is just some like particular maybe challenges that folks come in with, and then also particular tools or concepts or structures that you're working with?
Yes. Yes is the answer to all of that. It does differ a little bit working one-on-one to a group, because the group, you're dealing with a collective experience. And
Yeah.
so oftentimes some people in a group are experiencing one thing while another part of the group is experiencing another. In a one-on-one session, you're just working with one person. But the pieces that are, I think, I have noticed is the shift in presence, the ability to be present with yourself, whether you like it or not, happens when we start playing with safety, trust. How do we trust ourselves? How do we feel safe with ourselves? How do we feel safe and trust others? How we feel safe in an environment, trust an environment, whether it's one we're really familiar with or something that's very new. But I think across the board, that ability to be present and have awareness of what is in the present moment is something we tap into when we do this work of sustaining creativity, because it's really hard to feel safe if we don't know what safety feels like.
And how do you explore that with folks? Like, what is there maybe like an exercise you could describe or a tool that maybe
Yeah.
even listeners could play with?
Yeah, so there are a couple versions of it. In my the workshops that I do with university students, it's all done through movement. So everything is very physical, and we tap into the the experience of what safety feels like on an intra personal, so with myself, and how does safety move? How does the urge of safety in my physical body move my arms, move my legs? Maybe it moves, maybe it doesn't. So, honoring for yourself what that looks like, what that feels like. Maybe it has a sound with it, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's quiet and still. Maybe it's a fetal position. Maybe it's sitting up against something that feels sturdy and solid. So, you have something to press against. And then we move into, how do you take this experience of intrapersonal safety into interpersonal with someone else? So,
Mhm.
how do you take it on a walk around a room with other people? What happens to it? Can you hold on to it? Does it disappear? Or
Yeah.
can you only find it when you come into relationship with someone else? And so
Yeah.
all of these aspects of safety we play around with. And then, kind of on the other side, the more what I feel is more cognitive and cerebral is really thinking about these quadrants of safety. What do I need in my space to feel
Yeah.
safe? What are those comfort objects? Is it a picture of a pet? Is it a favorite stuffed animal? Is it a plant? Is it a rock like mine, or some other comfort item? Is it a fidget toy? Is it that helps you feel connected in that intrapersonal experience? But then going through that list, safe space, safe time, safe mind, and safe environment. And
Mm.
space and environment, while they can seem similar, they are different. The space is kind of our home space, and the environment is the larger world that
Well,
we engage with. So it could be your space at work, the culture that you're navigating in a work environment, the world at large that you're navigating as well. And so that's more of a cognitive piece. So I have an embodied piece and a cognitive piece, and we join them all together to help tap into that creative safety.
Beautiful. Beautiful. We're coming to the part of our conversation where I'm going to wind us into the final three questions that I like to ask every guest. And I actually want to flip the order a little because what you're talking about, you know, I'm certainly curious to learn more about your sustaining creativity method. And if listeners are curious to dive a little bit more deeply into it, what is the easiest way for them to do that?
Oh my goodness. Slide into my DMs on Instagram is probably the easiest way at Sustaining Creativity. I'm on all social media platforms at Sustaining Creativity. That's the easiest. You can shoot me an email. It's my full name, Marika Reisberg, Marika Reisberg, Reisberg at gmail.com. That's another great way to get in touch with me. Um, those are the two. Right now, my website is being revamped, so not an
Cool.
available piece, but hopefully soon.
So folks can learn more about your methods just simply by starting a conversation with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. And if there is a soapbox message that is just inherent in all the work that you do, in everything that you believe and are passionate about, what would that message be?
We are all creative, no matter if you are a performer, a dog walker, a lawyer, a domestic engineer, or a housewife, or a someone who's unemployed, someone who's overemployed. We are all creative, and creativity is is such a balm for regret, and it helps us navigate our world in deeper, more meaningful and exciting and joyful ways.
Yes, I love that so much. Finally, if there is a listener listening to this conversation who is feeling inspired by your words, they're feeling a little tingle, maybe they're feeling as though they've really lost touch with their childhood creativity and they're feeling that little inkling of reconnecting with it, or maybe they are someone who feels they are deeply in touch with their creativity, but they're having difficulty expressing it or allowing it to come
Mm.
through. And they're feeling inspired, but also overwhelmed, maybe scared, just confused about where to even start because it seems like such a big ball of wax. What would your words of encouragement be to that listener?
Hmm. Find one thing that is calling to you, whether it's getting dressed or going for a walk or breathing, and find a way to view that one thing through a creative lens. It could be choosing a breathing exercise that sparks something fun, like a rainbow breath or a lion breath or an eagle breath, or getting dressed with clothes that help you feel powerful or cozy, or go for a walk and pick a color and notice every blue object you see on your walk. It doesn't have to be big. It can start really small, something that feels easy for you, something that you know how to do, and you're just going to add some creative zest to it.
Beautiful. Just choose one
Huh?
thing to move toward. Mari, I feel reinvigorated to move toward what sparks my creativity. Thank you so much for this conversation and for creating the time and space to be here with
Mm.
me and with these listeners. It's such a pleasure speaking with you, and I look forward to doing it again.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join you and share all of this with your listeners. I love creativity, and I hope it sparks some joy and love for your listeners as well. And thank you again.
All right, take care. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor. Hit that follow button so you don't miss a thing and leave a rating or review. It helps more people find this show, and honestly, it makes my day. And if you're looking for more ways to trust yourself and start listening to that gut instinct of yours, come hang out with me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, trust yourself. You've got this.